What if the unimaginable becomes reality? What if the dark expanses of our solar system reveals something disturbing? NASA has recently discovered something in the solar system that pushes the boundaries of our understanding, something uncanny that was previously hidden in the shadows. What could this mystery be? And what consequences might it have for us? Surprising visit. What began as an acclaimed sensational discovery eventually evolved into one of the greatest mysteries of modern space exploration. But what had happened? Well, to understand this, we should first realize that in the astronomical world, literally no stone is left uncovered. Thus, the millions and millions of asteroids, comets, and meteoroids which draw their orbits through our home system always move into the focus of scientific interest. However, the object that was detected by the Pan-STARRS telescope in Hawaii on October 19, 2017, should be very different from everything known, because its origin was not in our native solar system. So it happened that the celestial body christened Oumuamua advanced to the first known interstellar object that had plunged into our cosmic neighborhood. That the surprising visitor, apart from that still had some enormous riddles in the luggage, should become clear to the experts only a little later. At first, there was the less spectacular theory that we were dealing with an ordinary comet. The problem, the mysterious characteristics and the unique flight behavior of the Oumuamua could not be arranged simply into a logical context. Flying mystery. Basically, if Oumuamua had been a comet, as initially assumed, it would have had a characteristic tail or a so-called comma. This is a shell-like structure which is based on the interaction between the solar wind and the missile. However, a more exact analysis should bring none of these typical phenomena to light. Even more inexplicable, however, appeared the trajectory described by the interstellar visitor on its journey. When Oumuamua was discovered, however, it was already on its way back into interstellar space. It had already passed our blue planet 5 days earlier at a distance of 24 million kilometers. A few weeks earlier, on September 2, 2017, the structure had entered our home system almost perpendicular to the orbital planes of the planets. Reconstruction of the path revealed that Oumuamua's roots must lie somewhere in the constellation Lyra. 7 days after its entry into the solar system, the object came into close contact with our host star. It approached the Sun up to 37.6 million kilometers and then made a cosmic U-turn which led it back into the gigantic expanse of space. However, the data analysis of different telescopes, among them also the famous Hubble telescope, revealed an inexplicable detail, which immediately put the astronomers into a mixture of fascination and perplexity. Apparently, Oumuamua had accelerated during its flight around the Sun. Astronomical dead ends. The unusual orbital deflection, in which the object flew somewhat faster than the mere influence of gravity would have allowed, soon fueled the most exciting hypotheses. At first, the experts tried to explain the phenomenon by the well-known means. According to them, the mysterious speed boost was due to the so-called outgassing of volatile components. In other words, the sun's rays heated up the spacecraft so much that various gases and dust were blown into space. But also, this theory should be accompanied by two not quite insignificant circumstances. On the one hand, not a single grain of dust could be detected in the immediate vicinity of the structure. And on the other hand, the outgassing is always accompanied by a drastic change in rotational behavior. As you can probably guess, there was no trace of this significant change in the case of Oumuamua. But apropos rotation behavior, in this category too, the interstellar visitor led everything known ad absurdum. Instead of rotating steadily around one of its main axes, the object literally lurches through space. The scientists came to this conclusion when they analyzed the no less mysterious brightness fluctuations of the body. Thus, its brightness is subject to periodic dips, which the researchers describe as exceptionally strong. Against this background, the assumption is obvious that we are dealing with a structure that has the shape of an oversized cigar. With regard to the exact dimensions, we can only speculate so far. These depend essentially on the exact rotation behavior and the reflexivity. But since we have too little data on this, experts have to fill in the gaps with estimated values. While some researchers believe that Oumuamua is about 160 meters long, others think a length of at least 800 meters is more likely. As briefly mentioned, the scientists were not supposed to detect any dust in the vicinity of the missile. Because of this, another stunning hypothesis quickly emerged. Possibly Oumuamuu consists almost completely of metal. If you take this exciting circumstance a bit further, you will sooner or later arrive at the hypothesis that sent the experts into a frenzy in November 2018. Probably we're dealing here with not a natural object, but with the work of an extraterrestrial civilization. The spaceship theory. Who believes now that this thesis originated in any half-serious forums cut himself? No, in truth, we have to owe this groundbreaking theory to a certain Avi Loeb, an Israeli-American astrophysicist who stands in the services of the renowned Harvard University. Together with his colleague Shmuel Bailey, Loeb came to the conclusion that Oumuamuu had all the characteristics we would expect from artificial spacecraft. In detail, the puzzling orbital deviation and the lack of dust formation could be explained by the characteristics of an extremely thin solar sail. This, in turn, is an artificial structure driven by the radiation pressure of sunlight. While this idea is still in its conceptual infancy in our terrestrial reality, Loeb says it is conceivable that it has been mastered by another species and elevated to a completely new level. Provided the estimated 0.3 to 0.9 mm thin solar sail has a very large surface area in the same breath, it could not have been forced off its prescribed route by the sun's radiation pressure during its journey. Criticism and doubts. But what does the rest of the scientific community actually say to these revolutionary thoughts? Well, the majority of the remaining scientists insist on the fact that the characteristics of Oumuamuu could be explained also with the characteristics of natural formations. So, among other things, the assumption stands in the room that the interstellar visitor embodies the fragment of a Pluto-like exoplanet which consists of frozen nitrogen. But because the outer layers melt away during the space journey, it had taken on a flat, cigar-like shape over time. And yet, the research series, which was completed back in December 2017 at the Green Bank Observatory in West Virginia, shows that the spaceship theory was by no means dismissed as far-fetched from the start. At that time, the radio telescope let its technical eye roam Oumuamuu, looking for signals that might be artificial in origin. 4 observation blocks and 2 weeks later, however, came the big disillusionment. No evidence of artificially generated signals could be found. But is this finding also equivalent to the fact that Oumuamuu is undoubtedly a natural object? What if the civilization that created the object is light years ahead of humanity? Yes, folks, the light year is a measure of length. Sit back again. If the intelligent species makes use of ways and means which are completely unknown to us at present and consequently cannot be detected by our terrestrial instruments, after all, the extraterrestrial people would have accomplished something of which we can only dream about at present. It would have brought the dream of interstellar travel into reality. In this regard, some people point out that we should definitely revise our human self-image. Put into a cosmic context, the aliens would be something like experienced university professors, while mankind resembles a baby that has just learned to crawl. The way to destruction. If and when the mystery of Oumuamuu will be unequivocally solved is still literally written in the stars at the moment. Since the ominous something is currently moving away from us at a breakneck speed of 26.3 kilometers per second, it seems unlikely for the time being to intercept the structure and study it at close range. However, experts are toying with the idea of ejecting a probe from the solar system by firing a solid fuel engine and taking up the cosmic chase. Even if this ambitious mission were to be launched one day, it would take another 17 years before the probe reached Oumuamuu. Let's assume at this point that this really is the work of an extraterrestrial species. Against this background, the researchers assume 36 intelligent civilizations alone in our Milky Way. This theory does not seem so far-fetched. But would it all be advisable in this case to chase Oumuamuu and to reveal thus also our own existence? Well, if it goes after the opinion of experts like Stephen Hawking, the answer to this question can only be no, under no circumstances. But what is it about the urgent warning that the genius, who died in 2018, gave us? After all, the question of whether we are alone in the universe is one of the oldest and most fascinating in human history. In any case, we cannot be accused of a lack of commitment in this regard. For example, we already have sent the Pioneer plaques and the Voyager Golden records into space to give the extraterrestrial finders basic information about our species and our home planet. But according to Hawking, this is a catastrophic mistake. What was intended on our part as peaceful contact attempt could become the disastrous boomerang which ends the extinction of mankind forever. After all, we cannot know at all who gets to see the appropriate information. If it concerns an aggressive civilization, it would be easy for them to uncover our weak points and to prepare a large-scale invasion attack. In this respect, Hawking referred to the fact that we ourselves are our best deterrent example. Just remember what happened to the Native Americans after Christopher Columbus discovered the so-called New World. Basically, we should do everything possible to remain unrecognized for as long as possible, and hope that our extraterrestrial neighbors do not have quite as many human traits in them as we do.
We've all seen them, videos of bizarre flying objects that display an inexplicable pattern of movement. But are they really extraterrestrial spaceships? Have the aliens visited Earth long ago? And do those responsible even know about it? The ISS cameras also regularly capture strange formations that leave us in disbelief. The International Space Station, or ISS for short, is a marvel of modern technology. Born out of a global collaboration, the Colossus, with a span of almost 110 meters, embodies nothing less than the largest and longest-lasting space station in history. But while the ISS is usually used by astronauts from all over the world to advance research in space, some believe that the exact opposite is also true. The space station serves as a welcome specimen for extraterrestrial observers to study the human species. A series of mysterious incidents has led to this assumption being put forward time and again. One of these strange occurrences took place in March 2017 when two astronauts were on a routine spacewalk. While the two were around 400 kilometers above the Earth's surface, they were carrying out ordinary maintenance work. We have Peggy Whitson to thank for the fact that we are able to marvel at the impressive images in our own earthly living rooms. The American astronaut documented the process with her camera. But what began as a mere routine soon caused emotions to run high online. Apparently, Whitson was filming something that was literally not of this world. An object that was as strange as it was eerie, floating through space and slowly turning on its own axis. Some users even saw this movement as a deliberate alignment to allow the object to better observe the two astronauts. The fact that the mysterious object was present for almost 7 hours shows that it was by no means a fleeting visitor. But what on earth was it? There is a UFO surveillance network. Well, for the alternative-minded users who are not afraid to push the boundaries of rationality, the answer was obvious. We are clearly dealing with a flying object that was artificially created, not by humans, but by a highly developed extraterrestrial civilization. Author Brad Olson is even of the opinion that this is just the tip of the galactic iceberg. In reality, the aliens would know about every step humanity takes. They have long since set up a comprehensive UFO surveillance network. In fact, Olson even thought that he knew exactly which UFO was being filmed at the time: the mysterious Black Knight, which has been monitoring the Earth for decades. According to the controversial author, the alien satellite describes a strange trajectory from pole to pole. As a result of the Earth's rotation, it is able to keep an eye on all continents. While the Black Knight is said to have been sighted long before the beginning of space travel on Earth, some suspect that it even served as inspiration for Nikola Tesla's concept of wireless energy transmission. But assuming that we are actually being spied on by aliens, what knowledge do they want to gather? Can they learn anything at all from humanity? Well, even if Brad Olson is not usually at a loss for an answer, however unconventional, he admits that observing the Earth is one of the greatest mysteries of our time. What are these mysterious lights all about? Since one uncanny observation does not a modern myth make, we should also take a look at another image that was also taken on board the ISS. Taken in 2015 by a British astronaut, it shows 3 ominous light sources moving in a coherent formation near the ISS. The formations captured by Russian cosmonaut Ivan Wagner 5 years later are in a very similar vein. While the space traveler filmed the dancing auroras above the Earth's horizon, a few mysterious luminous objects also crept into the scene. Of course, the Brad Olsons of this world are not the only people to comment on this highly debated ISS footage. But what do the conservative experts actually have to say about the clips? One expert who took up the matter was astronomer and image analyst Mark D'Antonio. To check whether the object filmed during the spacewalk could be a satellite or something similar, he looked at its composition. Due to the fact that the object is repeatedly immersed in the shadow of the ISS, D'Antonio assumes that it is comparatively small and close. So could it be that we are simply dealing with a piece of garbage? After all, more than 32,000 pieces of space debris have now accumulated in Earth's orbit. The ISS sometimes even has to maneuver out of the way to avoid a collision with the debris. Now, the movement pattern of the object speaks against this theory. One would expect space debris to move in a different direction over the Earth's surface. In reality, however, it appears that the object is flying parallel to the ISS and practically mirrors the movement of the space station. In fact, it also makes the Black Knight theory appear questionable. The satellite would probably describe a completely different trajectory to the ISS. For conservative circles, it's most likely that the supposed UFO actually originated from the ISS itself. As a result, we would see a shield here that was actually supposed to be installed on the space station. But unfortunately, the astronauts had a mishap and the shield was lost. And how can the strange points of light be explained? D'Antonio comes to the following conclusion. There was a leak in the Russian sector of the ISS from which a liquid escaped. In detail, what is shining so brightly in space is, well, nothing other than urine. Why did NASA interrupt the live stream? Of course, the footage presented does not mark the end of the much-discussed UFO flagpole. If you were on YouTube in the summer of 2016, you sometimes came across clips with titles such as "A UFO enters the Earth's atmosphere." And indeed, if we take a closer look at the footage that was streamed live from the ISS at the time, we can once again see a mysterious point of light. However, it doesn't seem to be aiming for the ISS. No, instead it is gradually descending towards our blue home planet. The strange thing is, just as the object is about to make contact with the Earth's atmosphere, the transmission suddenly breaks off. Some users immediately knew what it was all about. NASA had recognized what kind of object had crept into the image, and in order to maintain the official version that aliens and UFOs are nothing but unconfirmed fantasies, it put the blinders on for the public. However, it is in the nature of things that the statement from the space agency concerned was somewhat different. Of course, the official statement did not say that there was a huge conspiracy going on behind closed doors. No, the reason for the interruption was quite banal. In detail, NASA employees had not interfered with the live stream at all, they said. The video is from our high-definition Earth viewing experiment aboard the ISS, which is mounted externally to the space station. This experiment includes multiple HD video cameras pointed at the Earth and housed in a pressure and temperature-controlled enclosure. The experiment is automatically controlled to switch between the different cameras. Furthermore, the station regularly goes out of range of the tracking and relay satellites used to send and receive video, voice, and telemetry data. As soon as the signal is lost, the cameras display a blue screen or a present video panel. And even if this explanation sounds plausible, it leaves one question unanswered. Which object was actually filmed at the time? An unknown object 5,000 kilometers wide? While those responsible admit without hesitation that the images presented so far were all taken by the ISS cameras, the following case is somewhat trickier. For some time now, a number of images have been circulating on the internet that shows something almost unbelievable. A floating greenish shimmering giant whose dimensions dwarf anything known. In detail, the width of this colossal something is said to be no less than 5,000 kilometers. Against this background, it seems all the more astonishing that the images initially attracted little attention when they were published, a circumstance that would only change in 2020. Once they were in the public eye, the images spread like wildfire across the internet. As you can imagine, it didn't take long for the online community to split into different camps. Most recognized the incredibly large structure as nothing more than a bad fake. If the aliens are really intent on observing the Earth and its inhabitants from the shadows, would they really send a 5,000-kilometer object into their immediate vicinity? And why did they need the images at all? Shouldn't we have been able to see such a large spaceship with the naked eye? But others, and this is almost as astonishing as the photo itself, actually believe the image to be authentic. However, this unusual conviction is accompanied by great concern. If the extraterrestrials have sent such a large ship, then the time of silent espionage seems to be over.
Could we become the Galileo Galilei of our time? The Italian universal scholar proved that the worldview of his era was nothing but a dramatic fallacy. The sun does not revolve around the Earth, but the other way around. Now, the James Webb Telescope has revealed another revolutionary insight. Our common cosmology simply does not match reality. But what does this mean for our understanding of the universe? If the cosmos did not come into being as part of the Big Bang, how was it born? The look back. On December 25, 2021, the time had come. Together with the James Webb Telescope, the hopes and dreams of earthly scientists set out into the gigantic expanses of the cosmos. Specially designed for infrared astronomy, Webb pursues no lesser task than to revolutionize our knowledge of the universe. To achieve this, the most powerful space telescope of all time is literally looking back in time. One of its main scientific goals is to study the first luminous objects and galaxies that were formed after the Big Bang and during the so-called Dark Ages 13.5 billion years ago. But this is by no means all. Equipped with skills that exceed those of the predecessor Hubble telescope by a factor of 100, Webb is also taking a closer look at the formation backgrounds of galaxies, stars, planets, and black holes. Furthermore, the $10 billion instrument will help answer what is probably the oldest question in human history. Are we alone in the universe? Given the thousands and thousands of objects in the night sky, is it even possible that Earth is the only celestial body in the universe that harbors life? In this regard, Webb analyzes the atmospheres of exoplanets with regard to their potential habitability. The first images, which were presented to the interested world in July 2022, already gave an idea that Webb would live up to his high expectations with flying colors. From the stellar cradle NGC 3324, to the galactic group of 5 Stephan's Quintet, to the Southern Ring Nebula 2,500 light-years away, Webb provided us with space insights in an unprecedented level of detail. The so-called Webb's first deep field caused a particular sensation. Taken with the near-infrared camera, NIRCam, the image shows us the galaxy cluster SMACS 0723, 4.6 billion light-years away. Compared to Hubble's image of this region of the sky, Webb's image captivates us with its overwhelming degree of sharpness. Here, structures are made visible that were still hidden in the past. The discovery of the impossible. We have discovered something here that is so unexpected that it poses a real problem for science. This statement by Joel Lea, in the employ of Pennsylvania State University, mercilessly brings home to us a fact. The James Webb Telescope is uncovering not only the mysteries of the cosmos, but also our own ignorance. But what had happened? Why is the astronomical community currently in a full-blown research crisis? Well, originally, everything began with 6 inconspicuous light points. These had hidden themselves in a series of photographs which show us together 700 early galaxies. In detail, the gravitationally bound collections of stars already existed more than 13 billion years ago. That is, in an era when the universe itself was just 500 to 700 million years old. Basically, our theoretical models say that the first stars shone about 200 to 300 million years after the Big Bang. However, experts are still puzzling over when the glittering bright celestial bodies first came together to form galaxies and how quickly they grew up. In the meantime, scientists have identified a number of ancient galaxies in the Webb images. These structures existed 300 million years after the birth of the universe. And just as the experts had expected in advance, the galactic associations still presented themselves as very small and low mass. However, the 6 newly discovered galaxies should go beyond any theoretical framework. Despite their early date of formation, they are almost as massive as our Milky Way today. When the researchers from Swinburne University of Technology in Melbourne looked at the section of sky near the Big Dipper, they realized that the light from the 6 sources took more than 13 billion years to reach our terrestrial eye. Furthermore, the spectroscope analysis showed that we are dealing with very early galaxies. But how is it at all possible that the structures present themselves not as galactic tiny ones, but as full-grown giants? Well, the unrevealing answer from the experts is, it's not. According to our official models, the galaxies should simply not exist in this form. The background. 500 to 700 million years after the Big Bang, there was simply not yet enough normal matter to form so many stars in so short time. If one follows the remarks of the researchers, then the new discovery stands in the glaring contradiction to practically all usual models of the cosmology. An unsolved mystery. Since the formations were significantly more massive than scientists had ever expected, they initially believed that they had made a mistake. However, this suspicion was not to be substantiated during the subsequent troubleshooting. But how then can this finding be explained? Basically is valid. The cosmos is interested in cordially little which theories the terrestrial scientists put up. The processes of the universe are correct, one way or the other. To explain the existence of the massive galaxies at such an early time, the density of matter in the young universe would have to have been up to 5 times greater than postulated so far. The other, not less confusing explanation approach is based on the fact that the galaxies originated in a way which is completely unknown to us up to now. The tender rest hope of the astronomers consists now in the fact that the galaxies turn out in the aftermath nevertheless still as dust-covered black holes. However, if only one of these galaxies should be real, our understanding of the cosmology is completely thrown over the heap. Some experts seize the puzzling discovery in order to support a controversial thesis, which gathers at present ever more supporters around itself. The universe cannot have originated in such a way as it is propagated up to date. In other words, the Big Bang theory is wrong. But what has it with the backgrounds of this self-confident assumption on itself? The problem of the Big Bang. Basically, the concept of the Big Bang describes nothing else than the common emergence of matter, space and time from an original singularity. But how is it possible for us to at all reconstruct the literal beginning of everything? Well, we owe this to the circumstance that the universe has always been expanding. However, the universe does not expand into existing space. It is rather the space itself which becomes bigger incessantly. If one considers the process now retrogradedly, it is possible to calculate back to the starting point of this development. As an outstanding proof for the correctness of the Big Bang theory again, the proof of the cosmic microwave background radiation is considered. This nearly isotropic radiation fills the entire cosmos and embodies a relic from the early phase of the universe. However, one thing should not remain unexpected. The corresponding theses and models explicitly do not deal with the actual Big Bang, but with the immediate period after it. More precisely, we move here in a frame of so-called Planck time, and 400,000 years after the cosmic birth. What happened within the mysterious Planck time, which describes the smallest possible time interval for the laws of physics known to us, is completely uncertain. And although the Big Bang is firmly established in the ranks of the scientific community, it is not free from criticism. Consequently, the theory is not capable of deciphering the how and the why of it all. What led to the fact that 13.8 billion years ago, something arose suddenly from the nothing? Can something form all at once from the nothing? Was the process set in motion in any way, or was it pure coincidence? The assumption of cosmic inflation is also accompanied by some exciting question marks. In simple terms, this describes the phase in which the universe expanded rapidly within tiny fractions of a second. Now, however, Russian cosmologist Andrei Lindy suggested back in the 1980s that most of the universe has always continued to expand forever. This process would come to a standstill only in some bubble-shaped partial areas in which individual sub-universes form. Thereby, each cosmic world would contain its very own values of the natural constants and thus also individual physical laws. The end as the beginning. No matter whether the Big Freeze, the Big Crunch, or the Big Rip, even if the individual theories differ from each other in some aspects, they all reach the same conclusion: the universe will end one day. But what would be if the fate of the cosmos is not sealed with it still for a long time? Is the truth subject to an eternal cycle of decline and rebirth? Or in other words, if an end is always followed by a new beginning? In fact, some experts argue that the Big Bang was in fact a big bounce. The model of the Big Crunch says that the universe will literally collapse one day in the distant future. The initial assumption here is based on the fact that in trillions of years, gravity will become stronger than the effect of dark energy. Once this point is reached, the expansion of the cosmos will henceforth reverse into an accelerating contraction. At the end of this process, a single black megalock will remain, containing all matter and eventually swallowing itself. Now it is conceivable that just this structure serves from now on as a primordial seed of a new universe, and that this cycle repeats itself up to all eternity. The explanations of the physicist Nikodem Popolowski of the University of New Haven strike into a similar notch. He locates our entire universe in the interior of a black hole. Thus, in the heart of one of these objects, once a kind of primeval seed had ripened, which finally burst and paved the way for the unfolding of the cosmic world. Consequently, black holes would thus also serve as natural gateways connecting two universes, with the restriction that the galactic door can only be passed through from one side. Admittedly, the idea of a multiverse, a big bounce, and a black hole as a portal are undoubtedly intriguing. However, just like the Big Bang, these models are not capable of answering the before and why questions. Stephen Hawking once said that time itself only began with the Big Bang, which is why dealing with the before basically makes no sense. But who knows, perhaps the collapse of this belief is just a new James Webb discovery away. The edge of the universe. First, let's address a very general question. What is actually at the edge of the universe and how is it constructed? Well, the revealing answer to this question is, we don't have a clue. This is primarily because we don't even know if something like a cosmic edge exists at all. Despite all space flights, probes, and modern telescopes, the totality and the form of the cosmos still embodies the great unknown. The background of the Big Bang theory suggests that the universe is spherical, but this is only one of many assumptions. When it comes to the question of the shape, other geometric objects are also consulted, including the donut-shaped torus and even a trumpet. But what is it actually about the much-cited infinity of the cosmos? Although this term is used all too often, the truth is that we do not know whether it corresponds to reality. It is important here, however, that we keep in mind the difference between infinity and unboundedness, because basically is valid. Even if the volume of the universe is finite, it could be boundless. But what is meant by this apparent contradiction? Well, to illustrate this, experts often refer to the example of a small ant. If the creepy crawly were placed on the surface of a balloon, it could run for any length of time in any direction imaginable without ever encountering a marked-out edge. To the insect, it would seem as if it was moving along an infinitely large structure, even though this is of course not true in the case of a balloon. At this point, however, it should be noted that this is a highly simplified illustrative example. In contrast to the balloon, the universe is not embedded in a higher dimensional space according to classic cosmology. The edge of the universe. Does the universe now possess an edge? Yes, definitely. Well, this is at least true for us. Against the background of the cosmological principle, which says that the universe always presents itself to the observer in the same way, independent of his point of view and his direction of observation, there is a spherical space around the Earth, which limits our view to the stars. Since the Big Bang occurred about 13.8 billion years ago, One might think that the distance to our cosmic visual limit is consequently 13.8 billion light-years. But this is a fallacy. In this respect, we should remember that the universe is by no means a rigid, unchanging construct, but an entity that has always been expanding. However, the universe does not grow thereby into an existing space. It is rather the space itself which becomes unceasingly larger. The cosmic expansion causes that already covered distances were extended subsequently. Why the distance to the observation horizon is not 13.8 but 46.6 billion light-years. Those remote objects and structures which mark out today the border area of our universe were at the time of their formation only 40 million light-years away from us. However, because they crossed the event horizon some time ago, it is impossible to make any statements about their current processes. All we have left is this galactic view into the past. No less uncertain is the question, which secrets are hidden behind the observable universe? While some researchers assume that the areas that are invisible to us are structured in much the same way as those known to us, others suspect that there are things slumbering in the hidden regions of the universe that are beyond our imagination. A new age of research. The revolutionary James Webb Space Telescope is so powerful that it could even sense the warmth of a bumblebee on the moon from Earth. Set out into the vast expanse of space on December 25, 2021, Webb has since dedicated to the gripping task of uncovering the hidden mysteries of space and revolutionizing our knowledge of the universe. Specially designed for infrared astronomy, the $10 billion instrument is in some cases 100 times more sensitive to electromagnetic waves than its scientific predecessor, Hubble. In the coming years, the goal will be to observe the first luminous objects and galaxies in space, to decipher the structural evolution of the cosmos, and to analyze black holes, stars, and galaxies. Furthermore, Webb will help answer what is probably mankind's oldest question: are we alone in the universe? Given the thousands and thousands of objects that sparkle at us in the night sky, is it even possible that Earth is the only celestial body that harbors life? To crack this fundamental mystery, the James Webb Telescope is turning its technical gaze to exoplanets to study their atmospheres for the potential friendliness of life. So far, the Space Telescope has lived up to its high expectations with flying colors. The first images presented last July already left the world public completely stunned. While the images reach an unprecedented level of detail and reveal areas that seem invisible to Hubble and company, Webb was even able to detect the oldest galaxies known so far. Some of these gravitationally bound star collections existed already 235 million years after the Big Bang. To the classification, our Earth entered the cosmic stage only 9.2 billion years after the birth of the universe. However, some sensational discoveries come with a huge catch. Instead of expanding and deepening our knowledge of the universe, they show us how little we really understand of the big picture. Things get especially tricky when Webb discovers something that shouldn't even exist. An impossible discovery. What began as 6 inconspicuous points of light in space eventually resulted in a cosmological crisis. But what had happened? To uncover new details on the first near-infrared images from the James Webb Telescope, a team from Swinburne University of Technology in Melbourne took another look at the corresponding datasets. While the experts were analyzing the section of sky near the Big Dipper, however, an unusual detail caught their eye. 6 objects with a reddish glow whose age was quantified as more than 13 billion years on the basis of redshift. Accordingly, these light sources existed already 500 to 700 million years after the formation of the universe. From the further investigations, it became clear that all points show all characteristics which are typical for very early galaxies. The problem: their mass goes beyond the limits of our common cosmology. Actually, the researchers had expected that such early galaxies always embodied cosmic dwarfs. In reality, however, the structures were already as far developed as our Milky Way. But how is this possible at all? How can the galaxies host more than 10 billion solar masses of stars if the necessary matter for it was not yet present at all? Against the background of this apparent contradiction, scientists at first suspected that they had made a mistake, but they were wrong. Repeated data evaluations clearly showed that the mysterious structures existed in the presumed form. Even if only one of the detected galaxies is real, this would be tantamount to a dramatic upheaval of conventional cosmology. To explain the mere existence of the formations, the density of matter in the early cosmos would have been up to 5 times greater than previously assumed. The alternative explanation is based on the thesis that the surprisingly massive galaxies were formed in a way that is completely unknown to us. In one way or another, our previous theories about the development of the universe and its structures are being shaken up. Fundamental doubts. These and other puzzling discoveries are causing more and more researchers to turn away from the current Big Bang theory. The competing hypotheses are as numerous as they are exciting. Do we really live inside a black hole? Is our cosmos only the vanishing small link in an infinite chain of further universes? Or is the universe ultimately nothing more than a simulation? Basically is valid. Even if the origin of the universe seems to be everything else than unambiguously decoded, the experts agree in one point: the cosmos will reach its end sooner or later. A thesis which contains itself with the end of the universe hears on the name Big Crunch. This says that the universe will collapse one day under the influence of the gravitational force and will finally complete a kind of reverse Big Bang. Where this exciting conjecture is spun a bit further, the Big Bang becomes a big bounce. In other words, the universe has always gone through a universal cycle, with the end of one universe always marking the beginning of another. According to the Big Bounce theory, our cosmic world will also collapse one day, paving the way for a subsequent universe. Thereby, the interplay of demise and rebirth would repeat itself indefinitely. Not less exciting appears the theory, which is represented in particular by Nicodem Papalowski of the University of New Haven. In truth, we are inside of a black hole. In detail, the later cosmos was initially in the form of a tiny primordial seed. As soon as the point was reached at which the matter in the inside of the black hole could not be compressed further, the several billion solar masses heavy seed experienced a big rebound. It literally burst and started the unfolding of the universe. But as exciting as the individual theses may seem, they leave one fundamental question unanswered. What happened before? Did such a before exist at all? But if the universe or its predecessor was literally forming out of nothing, what created the nothing?
The view of the stars is overwhelming. When thousands and thousands of stars twinkle in the firmament, we realize again and again how small we actually are. Anyone with even a modicum of interest in the world of astronomy knows that a new chapter in modern space exploration has recently opened. Accordingly, the use of the James Webb Telescope should help in the foreseeable future to lift our level of knowledge about the cosmos into completely new spheres. And that is also badly needed. Despite all moon landings and probe missions, we're still far from having decoded the universe as a whole. Largest shockwave of all time. The dimensions of the universe exceed our imagination. Although we're able to quantify many distances and characteristics of space, the corresponding values often seem very abstract and not very tangible. How the universe presents itself as an overall construct is still uncertain. This also applies to the question of whether it's actually an infinite structure or not. In fact, we shouldn't forget at this point that our view of the stars has always been limited due to a number of factors. That which we can survey of the cosmos from our vantage point is appropriately termed the observable universe. Assuming that the universe is isotropic, or it always appears the same to the observer regardless of the direction of observation, there's a spherical space around the Earth that we can theoretically see. The distance to this optical barrier is about 46.6 billion light-years. But how is that even possible when the Big Bang happened only 13.8 billion years ago? Well, this is due to the constant expansion of the cosmos. Since the universe has always been expanding, distances already covered have also been extended retrospectively. As is well known, our Earth is part of the solar system, which in turn is located in the Milky Way. Current estimates state that our home galaxy is 170,000 to 200,000 light-years across. At this point, a brief classification. The astronomical measure of length of the light year corresponds to the distance that light travels in a vacuum within a year, or around 9.46 trillion kilometers. While the Milky Way, with its estimated 100 to 400 billion stars, already appears to be an unimaginably large structure, it is still infinitely small in the overall context of the cosmos. To understand this, it's worth taking a look at the almost gigantic object that the experts added to the star charts a few months ago. In detail, this is the most powerful known shockwave ever, which exceeds the size of our home galaxy by a factor of 60. The background of these exciting discoveries shows us how brutal the spectacles of the cosmos really are. About 730 million light-years from Earth, the galaxy cluster Abell 3667 is in chaos. The investigations so far show that two groups of galaxies are literally colliding there. In total, the cluster contains around 550 individual galaxies. The radio waves associated with this galactic pileup are visible in Earth's telescopes. In detail, we owe it to the Meerkat radio telescope in South Africa that we can now marvel at this elemental spectacle with our own eyes. What leaves us open-mouthed has enormous potential for knowledge for the experts. The recordings show that such structures are significantly more complex than previously assumed. The shock waves act like huge particle accelerators that catapult the electrons to almost the speed of light. According to this, the individual radio arcs grow by more than 5.3 million kilometers within a single second. The complex patterns and bright filaments show in turn along which magnetic field lines the electrons are accelerated. However, we're by no means dealing with a current event. Apart from the fact that looking at such distant structures is already tantamount to optical time travel, the shockwave may have been set in motion a billion years ago. The energy released when the galaxy groups collided is the largest amount known since the Big Bang. Fast radio bursts. They're just as puzzling as they are fast-moving. The so-called fast radio bursts only last a few milliseconds and have been presenting scientists with insurmountable puzzles for some time. To this day, we don't know what the true background of these radio bursts is. While in some cases they're one-off events, the so-called repeaters seem to follow a sort of set rhythm. Until recently, fast radio bursts should only be detected in foreign galaxies, but this circumstance has been a thing of the past since 2020. In fact, the experts made a first breakthrough when investigating these phenomena within the Milky Way. Magnetars were identified as the main source of the outbursts. This in turn means neutron stars with extremely strong magnetic fields, where neutron stars or pulsars themselves represent the final stage of a massive star. These relatively small objects rotate around their own axis at breakneck speed. The current record holder even achieves 716 revolutions per second. Apart from the theory that the fast radio bursts are due to the strong radiation bursts from neutron stars, the merger of two pulsars is also discussed as a source. However, the solution to the riddle may also lie in the violent star deaths. When a massive star has reached the end of its existence, it ejects its outer shells in a dazzlingly bright explosion. The list of possible explanations is long, but the most exciting are those that have an artificial background rather than a natural one. So we could be dealing with a radio signal from an extraterrestrial civilization. The assumption based on the influence of extraterrestrial solar sails takes the same line. Encountering snakes. The astronaut Franklin Story Musgrave is a highly intelligent person who's completed 6 degrees and is also a flight instructor, aerobatic pilot, and commercial pilot. He started his professional career by training as a flight mechanic with the U.S. Navy, but he also worked as a surgeon and as a professor of physiology and biophysics. Between 1967 and 1996, he was an astronaut and took part in 6 missions into space. What are you to think of the fact that this smart, resilient individual has claimed in 2 interviews that he has seen an 8-foot-long snake in space several times? The snake moved in waves and followed him for a long time. He admitted it could have been a rubber seal. However, he also said that the longer you travel in space, the more incredible things you see, which convinced him that there were other creatures out there. In all reality, the chances of Franklin actually encountering a snake in space are very, very slim. After all, what would the snake eat? Better yet, what would it breathe? There's virtually no oxygen in space. It seems nearly impossible for a snake to survive for any length of time without proper food, water, and most of all, air. However, stranger things have happened. The real question here is, even if it wasn't a snake, was it truly a rubber seal like he believes? If that's the case, it's pretty scary to think that some sort of spacecraft lost an important seal at some point in history. An eerie knock. In order for us to hear a sound waves must be able to propagate through air, water, or a solid object, so there can be no noise in the vacuum of space. Still, astronaut Yang Li Wei claimed that during China's first spaceflight in 2003, he heard a mallet banging sound. The astronaut was sure it hadn't come from inside or outside the spacecraft. The noise was also heard on subsequent Chinese missions. There's been much speculation about the origin of the tones, and more than 10 years later, Yang Li Wei said in a lecture to students that he believed pressure changes were the cause. Scientist Liu Hong confirmed his theory because similar sounds had been reported from Lunar Palace 1. This lab can be sealed airtight to simulate conditions on the lunar surface. The noise occurs because the walls deform minimally under the changed pressure conditions. That sounds plausible, but what is scarier? Inexplicable noises in space, or that a space capsule reacts audibly to the stresses of flight? It wouldn't be the first time that someone has reported a strange thing happening in outer space. But what could be worse than any of this is the feeling of being watched while you're tens of thousands of miles away from home. But that's exactly what happened to this next set of astronauts who landed on the moon. Being observed during moon landings. In 1969, during the Apollo 11 mission, humans landed on the moon for the first time. Astronaut Buzz Aldrin said he saw a light in space on approach to land that appeared to be tracking his spacecraft. In 1972, astronaut Charles M. Duke was photographed standing on the rim of a lunar crater with a ball of light in the background. This gave rise to speculation about aliens and extraterrestrial spacecraft observing human activity on the moon. Many years later, however, Aldrin said that the crew wondered during the flight whether the light came from the ejected rocket that they had previously released. It was concluded that it was a reflection on a piece of the spacecraft that had been dropped. However, this information was not published. Of course, Duke's photo also needs to be explained. There was a lens flare in the backlight. However, the question arises as to why these simple explanations were only announced after decades. Rumors have speculated over the years about Buzz and his claims about what it is he saw that day. It's been claimed that a small segment of the moon landing broadcast that appeared on live TV at the time had been removed in order to keep Buzz and his team quiet about what they'd seen. Over the years, several people have claimed to have found the lost footage of what truly took place on the moon that day. In the footage, not only does Buzz claim to see a light, but he also claims to see what appears appears to be a separate spacecraft hovering just over the horizon of the moon. He reports what he sees to the command center back on Earth, but they tell him to simply hurry up, do what needs to be done on the moon, then get back into his spacecraft. Keep in mind, this portion of the story is nothing more than speculation. While audio recordings have supposedly been leaked over the years, none of them are confirmed to be real. It's very likely that these audio recordings were created as a hoax, so take this information with a grain of salt. We truly don't know what happened on the moon that day, nor do we know where these mysterious beams of light came from. Mysterious moonlights. As already mentioned, most of the fast radio bursts were located in alien galaxies. However, this does not mean that the greatest mysteries of the cosmos are always hidden in distant clusters of stars. On the contrary, one of the most exciting space mysteries lies dormant right in front of our earthly front door. By this, we mean the mysterious luminous phenomena on the moon, which have kept experts in suspense for some time. In detail, these lunar transient phenomena are temporary, locally limited changes in color and brightness on the moon's surface. So far, over 1,500 such apparitions have been reported. The problem, since many of these reports were recorded by amateurs under poor sighting conditions, it's not always clear how valid the observations actually are. However, the official investigations of the professionals prove that the moon blinking undoubtedly exists, and not just since yesterday. As early as 1958, the Soviet astronomer Nikolai Kozyrev managed to record such an event in the Alphonsus crater. Based on the spectral distribution, the scientists believed at the time that the spectacle was due to the influence of molecular carbon. However, we can still only speculate about the true formation mechanisms. Impacts on the lunar surface are discussed as possible triggers. When the galactic missiles hit the satellite's exterior, the regolith, commonly known as moon dust, would be kicked up and cause a brief change in reflectivity. Another hypothesis deals with a possible residual volcanism. Despite the fact that our satellite does not show any active volcanoes, it is conceivable that some molten areas still exist. As a result, volcanic gases could rise to the surface in some places and stir up the regolith. The wow signal. It doesn't matter whether it's the Pioneer plaques or the Voyager golden records, mankind has already made several attempts to draw attention to their existence in the gigantic expanses of space. As is well known, all of our attempts to make contact so far have fallen on deaf ears. And according to experts like Stephen Hawking, we're lucky that's the case. The exceptional physicist who died in 2018 warned that the information contained in the messages could end up in the hands of an aggressive species. Then it would be easy for the aliens to expose our weak points and to enslave the Earth and its inhabitants. As we all know, however, this is still purely a fictional scenario. The existence of extraterrestrial life forms has not yet been confirmed at all. Nonetheless, the legendary WOW signal is considered the most promising candidate when it comes to the question of an extraterrestrial message. When astrophysicist Jerry R. Amen recorded the signal on August 15, 1977, he wrote an odd wow on the accompanying document. In fact, the narrowband signal showed striking similarities with a signal that's artificially generated with an antenna. Basically, the WOW signal has all the characteristics of an interstellar communication attempt. At the same time, however, it would also be consistent with the characteristics of an intense pulsar outburst. Other explanation attempts deal with a comet or terrestrial factors. However, a more detailed analysis turns out to be a very demanding undertaking, because in truth, the signal was never received again since then. What we do know is that the origin was in the constellation Sagittarius. The Big Ear radio telescope, which received the signal back then, is now history. After almost 40 years of service, it was dismantled in 1998. The site that was sold was to be converted into a golf course without further ado. The corpses of animals. At first, it wasn't known how being in space would affect the human body, and experiments had to be carried out. Therefore, the first space travelers were animals. In 1947, a container of fruit flies was flown more than 170 kilometers up and parachuted back to Earth unharmed. Later experimental animals were often less fortunate. Albert I, a rhesus monkey sent into space a year later, suffocated in flight. His successor, Albert II, died re-entering the atmosphere because the parachute failed to deploy. Other animals weren't even planned to be brought back to Earth. Laika, the first animal sent into space by Russia, was poisoned to save the dog from starvation. However, the animal died a few hours after takeoff from a combination of panic, heat, and lack of air. So it's possible that Laika and other long-dead test animals are still circling the Earth in their space capsules and encountering astronauts. Thankfully, no reports of this have ever been made. However, the Earth tends to keep things close to its atmosphere for countless decades before the debris eventually re-enters the atmosphere or flies off into space. Because of this, it's entirely possible that some of these test subjects are still hovering around. Most notably, Laika the dog may still be out there, hovering around Earth until the end of time. It's truly creepy when you really think about it. UFOs. There are many wild stories about UFOs, but there are also reports about UFOs that come from some serious sources. At least that's what astronaut Gordon Cooper, who died in 2004 and took part in 2 space missions in 1965 and 1969, claimed. He said government officials have repeatedly told him about extraterrestrial contacts. However, Cooper was not allowed to say who this information came from. Although colleagues contradicted him and claimed that no such stories had been brought to their attention and that Cooper had never spoken of extraterrestrials, Cooper publicly advocated investigating the matter. In 1985, he wrote an open letter to the UN in which he called for an international scientific investigation and presented his own experiences. We don't know for sure if Gordon Cooper was really telling the truth or if he was simply trying to drum up fame and fortune in his final years on Earth, since his time in the space industry had come to an end. It's entirely possible he was telling the truth, but it's much more likely that he fabricated these stories. Moon dust, a major health hazard. Did you know that the reason scientists and astronauts haven't returned to space in such a long period of time may be because of how hazardous the environment is? In addition to the high radiation from space, there's another major health risk that astronauts are faced with when landing on the surface of the moon: moon dust. The dust on the surface of the moon differs significantly from the dust we're exposed to here on Earth. Since there's no wind or rain on the moon, the dust particles on the moon's surface are never filed down, meaning they are razor sharp and ready to wreak serious havoc on your lungs, throat, and nostrils if you're not wearing a top-of-the-line mask. This dust sticks to everything, including the suits of the astronauts, their skin, their eyes, and everything in between. The particles are known to be 50 times smaller than a human hair, meaning they can settle in the astronaut's lungs and remain there for many months. The damage caused by these particles is no joke and has been referred to as moon hay fever. Astronauts remain sick for the better part of a year before their bodies learn to fight off these harmful toxins. Accordingly, all 12 of the astronauts who stepped on the surface of the moon throughout the missions carried out by NASA have complained about having serious lung issues, blocked areas, and sneezing attacks that lasted for many months. We don't know what these dust particles may do long-term, but some experts and doctors believe that moon dust can lead to serious health complications and irreparable lung damage. Logistical efforts and supply problems. Apart from the major health issues that plague astronauts who've been to the moon, there are also some logistical problems that prevent us from returning, and these issues cannot be underestimated. Simply launching a rocket from the surface of the Earth is a major expense that NASA simply doesn't have the funds to do unless it's absolutely necessary. The thrust required to push a rocket from the surface of the Earth is roughly 15 times that of a normal aircraft that can take us across the planet. A rocket is known to devour up to 6 tons of fuel within a single second, and this fuel comes at an incredible cost. It's also remarkably complicated for an astronaut to cover the distance between the Earth and the Moon on a single tank of fuel. Also, keep in mind, they have to have enough fuel to return as well. A total of 384,400 kilometers must be covered both ways, meaning it's extremely expensive to fuel a rocket of this size. Because of this, the rockets are usually designed to level out in orbit once they gather enough momentum to soar the rest of the way to the Moon without using fuel, after leaving the Earth's atmosphere, of course. Taking care of the astronauts who are on board the spacecraft is also incredibly tricky, since there are obviously no stops that can be made along the way to uncharted territory. This means that launching a rocket to the Moon with enough food and water to sustain the astronauts for more than a week can be very difficult, and the unspoilable food that the astronauts must eat throughout their mission has to be carefully designed and prepared for the journey. This alone costs many millions of dollars. Alright folks, now it's your turn. What do you think about the mysterious and awe-inspiring space phenomena we presented to you today? As always, let us know your thoughts, suggestions, and feedback on our video in the comments below. If you're already there, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to stay up to date from now on. Finally, feel free to take a look at the other videos of our channel, which you can access by clicking on one of the pictures in the credits. Thank you for watching, take care, and see you next time.